Hi, and welcome to Psychology 2. We're now starting Chapter 3, Developmental Psychology. And what we're going to be doing here is looking at how we develop through a lifetime. And we're going to look at a number of different theories. We'll look at development as it relates to our physical body and the growth and development. And then we'll also look at cognitive development and moral development in the second video. So let's get on with this, and we'll get started right away. And good luck with this, and I hope everybody's doing well so far in this semester. So good luck on the rest of the semester as well. So when we look at the issues in developmental psychology is a study of how humans grow, develop, and change throughout a lifespan. And one of the first elements to consider is this nature-nurture. Is heredity imposing some limits on what a person can become? Home, education, nutrition, etc. can evoke positive and negative influences. And looking at resilience, the ability to bounce back, is vulnerabilities and difficult temperament, these genetic disorders. When we look at development, we're looking at the starting point in terms of what role does heredity play, and what role does the environment we grow up in play? Secondly, we look at the continuous development in stages. So when we see, how we grow up over time, is it done in stages, or is it just a long, steady, continuous growth curve? And then thirdly, to what extent are personal characteristics stable over time? Is who you were as a child really just who you become as an adult, just a grown-up version of yourself? And that's part of what developmental psychology wants to sort of tackle. So when we look at approaches to studying, what we're looking here is approaches to studying developmental. Longitudinal studies are really, really important. You want to study groups or cohorts of people over long periods of time. The same group of participants followed at different ages. This keeps a consistent component about your participants. And you want to be able to use cross-sectional studies. This is where groups of participants of different ages are compared on various characteristics to determine age-related differences. And this is what they've done over many years to sort of look at and develop these sort of theories and therefore also patterns about how we develop over a lifespan. So let's begin with heredity and prenatal development. So what we're seeing here is, and part of what you need to pay attention to in your textbook, is look at the elements about genes, dominant and recessive genes, chromosomes, and sex genes, or sex chromosomes. This is looking at the development from conception to birth. And you'll find a lot of this in your textbook. Now what we'll move quickly into, but we'll follow up on, is these stages of development in prenatal development. Conception marks the beginning of the prenatal period, and it usually takes place in the fallopian tubes and fertilization of the egg by the sperm. The zygote is the cell that results from the union of sperm and ovum. During the first 2 weeks after conception, rapid cell division occurs, and a zygote is about the size of a period at the end of a sentence. By 3 to 8 weeks, you have what's called the embryo. It's a developing human organism. It has major systems, organs, and structures of the body already starting to develop. From head to toe, this is the cephalocaudal development, and the trunk. And from the trunk to the extremities is proximal distal development. Then the fetus, this is from week 9 to birth, grows rapidly. Organs, structures, body systems. The fetus can respond to outside stimuli, especially sounds. Research by DeCasper and Spence showed that infants showed a preference for stories that had been read during the first 6 weeks, or the final 6 weeks of pregnancy. Now the monozygote identical twin is one egg fertilized by a sperm. However, the zygote splits into two embryos, and their identical genetic code whereas the dizygotic fraternal twins are two eggs released during ovulation and are fertilized by two different sperm. Now, there are negative influences on prenatal development, and there's a list there that you can see. Teratogens are harmful agents in the prenatal environment that can negatively impact on prenatal development or even cause birth defects. Impact depends on both intensity and the time at which it is present during the prenatal development. Most devastating consequences occur during the period of the embryo. Heroin, cocaine, crack during pregnancy are linked to miscarriage, premature birth, low birth weight, breathing difficulties, physical defects, and fetal death at times. The critical period, this period is so important to development that a harmful environmental influence at this time can prevent a body structure from developing normally. Body structures will not form properly, nor will they develop later. They can impair later intellectual and social development. And then fetal alcohol syndrome is a condition caused by maternal alcohol intake during pregnancy. The baby is born oftentimes with a mental disability and with a small head, with facial and/or organ deformities. Commonly included are wide-set eyes and a short nose with behavioral abnormalities, hyperactivity and short attention span. Alcohol crosses the placenta barrier. Alcohol levels in the fetus almost match those of the mother's blood. Fetal alcohol affects children prenatally exposed to alcohol with some correct characteristics of fetal alcohol syndrome, but less severe forms. Now, if we move forward into perceptual and motor development, we find that what we can start with is a neonate, which is a newborn up to about 1 month. And within the neonates, there are reflexes or inborn unlearned responses. Vision is about a 20 to 600 at birth, and 20/20 reached at about 2 years. You see the image on the bottom left-hand corner there, just seeing how that develops over time. Newborns focus best on an object about 9 inches away, and newborns prefer color stimuli to gray, can't distinguish all colors. Now on the right-hand side, you're seeing what's called the visual cliff apparatus, and it's used to test depth perception in infants and young animals. Most babies ages 6 to 14 months can be coaxed to crawl across the shallow side. Babies prior to 6 months will cross onto the deep side. So as babies get older, they recognize there's what you're seeing with the checkered there is a bit of a cliff, a drop. And as the child gets older, they see that the depth is there and they are apprehensive. Now there is a glass sheet that goes across to the mother so the child wouldn't really fall, but under the age of 6 months the baby would crawl right across without recognition of the depth. Learning habituation decreases in response or attention to the stimulus as the infant becomes accustomed to it. So the more accustomed an infant becomes to a particular stimulant, the less the more habituated they become. So here we have physical motor development, and you can see the different stages based on time, and would be considered milestones. So based on the longitudinal studies and the cross-sectional studies, this is what most frequently happens at these ages. And this is why when you go take your baby to the doctor, you're checking for milestones to see that there is normal physical and motor development. And a lot of this is because of the amount of research that has been done to determine what these milestones would be and what these ranges of expectations would be. In adolescence, the stage that begins at puberty and encompasses the period from the end of childhood to the beginning of adulthood. And puberty is the period of several years with rapid growth, physical changes accumulating in sexual maturity. The physical changes of puberty from 10 to 13 years old in girls range from 7 to 14, and for 12-year-olds for boys ranges from 9 to 16. Girls tend to enter puberty sooner than do boys. Begins with hormone surges, followed by growth spurts. Girls grow spurts between ages of 10 and 13. Girls reach full height usually between ages of 16 and 17. Boys grow spurts between 12 and 15 years of age, and boys reach full height somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 years of age. If we carry this on and go past adolescence into the middle age, We see that there's a gradual decline in testosterone for men. And you'll find in that graphic there some of the implications of what starts to change, both in terms of the pituitary gland, the brain, the physical health, bone health, the testes, and sexual health. And then in menopause in women, you find that there are changes that occur there that are a part of normal development as we age and grow older. Now we'll touch on here is the cognitive development. Now those of you in ECE should be familiar with this, Piaget's theories of cognitive development. Changes in schemes. Now schemes underlie the 4 stages of cognitive development. Each stage reflects qualitatively different ways of reasoning and understanding the world. Now these stages occur in a fixed sequence. We can't change the order. Accomplishments of one stage provides the foundation for the next. Children throughout the world seem to progress through these stages in the same order, but they show individual differences in the rate in which they pass through them. Each child's rate is influenced by the level of maturation and experience. Transition from one stage to another is gradual, but not abrupt. Children often show aspects of 2 stages while going through transitions. Now schemas, these are cognitive structures or concepts used to identify and interpret information. This is the way that we organize the world around us, is in these cognitive maps. And we sort of categorize things into little boxes to help us understand the world around us, and these would be schemes. Now the first stage of development is assimilation, and this is the process by which new objects and events and experiences or information is incorporated into existing schemes. So we start to fill our boxes with related information, and it starts to solidify into something we could say with some certainty. A child who calls any male stranger daddy is an example of taking these new information and putting it in an existing box. It may not always be correct, but it's starting to shape what words and concepts mean. Whereas accommodation, this is a process by which existing schemes are modified and new schemes are created. It incorporates new objects, events, and experiences or information. So this is where we start to grow and develop our language and our idea about the world and stretch out beyond our immediate surroundings. Piaget developed many stages, and I'm going to quickly review them here in terms of the stages of cognitive development. Now his first stage was sensomotor stage, and this was for children 0 to 2 years of age, where the infant gains an understanding of the world through their senses and their motor activities. Actions and body movements would be one example of a motor activity. Infants' behavior gradually moves more from mostly reflexive to more complex and intelligent. The infant learns to respond and to manipulate objects and use them in a goal-directed activity, and that's in that first 2 years. And once they have a foundation in that, they would move into object permanence, the realization that objects continue to exist even when they can no longer be perceived. So when you play the game of, hide and seek or peekaboo, the child in that 0 to 2, when you cover a toy with a piece of paper, they don't know that it's still there. But once they get into object permanence, they begin to be aware that even though it's covered and not visible, it's still there. The preoperational stage, ages 2 to 7, is where we enter into symbolic function, the understanding that one thing can stand for another. An object, a word, or a drawing, the use of words to present an object. Orange both is a color and a fruit, and they engage in what's beginning to be pretend play, imagining a block as a car or imagining a doll as a real baby. The egocentrism is a child's belief that everyone sees what he or she sees and thinks as he or she thinks and feels as he or she feels. The results are illogical thinking. A cookie is only good if it's unbroken, for example. That if I eat a cookie that's broken, well, somehow the child won't see that as acceptable. It's not okay because I wouldn't like it as a broken cookie. You shouldn't like it either. Then they move into the concrete stage, which is the 7 to 11 or 12 years of age, and this is where they introduce what's called reversibility. The realization that any change in the shape, position, or the order of matter can be reversed mentally. So for example, if I show you the letter B, and then I flip it over the other way and it becomes a D, and then I turn it upside down and turn it back the way it was and it's now a P, and if I flip it back on its side again, it's now a Q. You know that it's not changing actual letters, it's just the same letter being put in different order. If I show you a watch and then I change the angle of that watch, you don't automatically think it's a Buick. You know it's still a watch even though it's at a different angle. That's reversibility. Conservation, you can see on page 92 an examples on page 93. The concept that a given quantity of matter remains the same despite being rearranged or changed in appearance, as long as nothing has been added or taken away. So a child who sees you pour from a tall, slender beaker 1 liter of water into a short, stout beaker that holds 1 liter of water, a child who hasn't gone through conservation will recognize and will think that the taller, slender container has more water in it, even though you just poured it into a stout beaker. Whereas a child who's gone through conservation will know that it's the same amount of water, it's just in 2 different shapes containers. And then lastly, they'll go through the formal operations, and this is between 11 and 12 years and beyond, where pre-adolescents and adolescents can start to apply logical thought to abstract, verbal, and hypothetical situations, and to problems in the past and the present and the future. Hypothetic, deductive thinking. Now, the ability to base logical reasoning on the hypothetical premise, they're able to comprehend abstract subjects like philosophy and politics and become interested in the world of ideas. They begin to formulate their own theories and to think of what might be and conceive of perfect solutions to the world and their own problems. Now, this has just been the introduction to development. We'll find that we'll look at some more issues of development in the next video. So stay tuned and we'll see how this gets going. We're almost there. We're getting through the semester. We're getting awful close to the break. All right. Enjoy yourself and we'll see you in a minute.